always joy. It's always joy. It's always chosen. It's always chosen. And always black. Always black. I'm always black.
When I tell you, I am super, super excited for the person that I have on the show today that I am interviewing. This brother is down for the cause. He is with, I respect him so much. I'm not even going to be sophisticated and curse because I'm going to try keeping cute today in my intro. But I have Remy, Merriex. Like when I tell you, you are one of my fave CDs I ever had the pleasure to work with. One of my favorite brothers ever to work with, period. I am too geeked to have you on here, especially seeing how I'm like, oh, this brother got a team now. Like he was like, yesterday's price.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Not today's price.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I mean, Joi, like obviously you're one of my favorite people. So anytime you need anything, I'm always glad to sit down and talk.
Thank you so much. I mean, clearly we were brought together. We were working at the same company. I don't have no money like that, so I won't be saying the name because I'm not trying to have nobody legal department be like, so actually you have to take everything down. But that's how we like got cool with one another, really got to work on like dope projects. And just in such a short amount of time, it was just very apparent like that you know to the tip top every like of what you're doing in this industry. You were always writing for the creative, always writing for the stories to be told, and really just focused on that. And I'm honored, honestly. Like this isn't like no clout shit. Like I'm truly honored to have you on the show. So thank you for that. So
always.
We're gonna jump right into it.
Let's do it.
You've been in this industry for a minute, right? So you have a lot of experience. You work for a lot of different brands, but like, let's rewind it all the way back to the origin story. Like, did you grow up in a creative household? Like, what was it that got that imagination spark going inside of you that made you look up one day and say, you know what? Mm-hmm. I'm going to take this route all the way to a career.
Yeah, it's funny because, first of all, yes, I grew up in a very creative household. Like my whole family is either artists of some sort or frustrated artists of another sort.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so we usually have very dramatic gatherings. But my mother's a costume designer, and my father worked mostly like he was actually whenever anybody when people say like hustle culture and like hustling and all that kind of stuff, that was my dad. Like he was. He would do illustrations on the side. He would sell to people. We would be driving down the road. He would stop, run across the street to pick up a can. Like he's like that kind of dude. He would be like turning over cars. He bought wrecked cars and like fix them up and then sell them like full on wholesale all the time, everywhere, right? And then I have a few different cousins that are in the music industry or rappers or singers or instrumentalists. And then for myself, I actually started out in the sciences. Actually, I'm a very, very big astrophysicist. Like that was actually what I was going to be for the longest time.
You were about to be Neil Tyson deGrasse, just like casually.
Almost, yeah, you get it.
It's wild. Okay.
And I mean, it's still like a huge part of my personality and kind of the way that I think is still grounded in a lot of analytics and science and data. But I actually kind of started my path to art, I would say back in, I'm going to tell a little story. I'm going to try to keep it short. So I was like 7 years old, and my dad had this thing where he would always take us on adventures. And some of these adventures would be like, we're going to Big Bear, we're going to spend the weekend up there, or we're going to Arizona, or it would be like, we're going to go to get ice cream at like after dinner. But there was usually like some kind of adventure my dad would take people on after dinner. And one night when I was 7, he took us to a mall, like an empty mall parking lot that was not too far from our house. It was probably like 20 minutes from our house. And everybody was like, we were so used to him taking us places. We knew there was a shoe that was going to drop somewhere. Just couldn't understand why it was an empty parking lot. So he had everybody get out of the car and we start walking. He's just like, everybody, come on, let's go. We're going this way. And then we walked to the other side of the mall, and this was the first time I'd ever seen this. it was hundreds of people. There were trucks and cars everywhere. There were lights everywhere. And there was this weird looking car that was basically skating around the parking lot being chased by a van. And so we sat there for probably 20 minutes, I think, just watching it because it was like a big spectacle. And that what we were watching was the first Back to the Future movie being filmed. And so like I was blown away because this was like I'd heard of sets and you see stuff on TV every once in a while, but actually stepping foot on a set was a completely different experience for me. And 3 months later, I think, it was about 3 or 4 months later, we actually saw the movie in the theater, and I was like gone. I was like, okay, that's obviously what I want to do. Yeah. This is like I didn't realize that you could like build so many interesting stories and make people feel things in that way. And it kind of opened a whole nother side of my personality and my like psyche up. And that's, I think, where I started my journey as a creative and as an artist. So I started writing, and actually, I think for the first probably 10 years that I wrote, I actually specialized in poetry. So I have like mountains of poems that I've written, and I like went through high school with that, in college, like writing a lot of poetry. And then at some point, I kind of got to know more about. I studied film, and the storytelling and technical aspects of film kind of made me understand visual art more. And I kind of shifted and drew into visual art and drew into like motion graphics, and the world at that point was just getting interactive, meaning the internet was moving from a place where it was just static pages you would go to and read and leave to a much more interactive storytelling, interactive filmmaking on the internet. And since I already had a science background, I knew how to code. And so there was this kind of melding between the stuff that I had learned in my life before and the opportunities kind of in the world that existed at that point. There was nobody I knew that did anything like that. Like, I think it was probably another like 5 years after I really started in this industry that I really met any other Black people that were doing this.
Wow.
And I would say the vast majority of my career has not like worked at all with Black folk. It's only fairly recently that so many more folks are coming into the industry. And it's part of the reason why I'm so personally focused in getting people in and getting them elevated quickly. But yeah, that's a very long story to kind of get where I am now. And then, yeah, all kinds of crazy since there. I'm big into entertainment. So I've spent a lot of my career in the entertainment field, working on TV shows and films. And then at a certain point, I started dipping my toes in tech. And after working in tech for a while and working in like global branding for, companies like Shazam and Facebook and all kinds of other groups in between there, I have a fairly rare skill set now that I understand very deeply entertainment and building like groundbreaking entertainment campaigns, but I also understand global branding, which is a whole nother completely different wing of our business. But I can bring them together. So that's kind of what I do all day.
See, all I heard in that whole story was you were blessed by Marty McFly to be great. So that's like literally, I'm like, real. But all jokes aside, I think it's number one, it shows the power of your parents like imprinting on you. And let's be honest, like our parents aren't perfect humans. So everyone got a story of like the good and the bad. So it's just life. You understand that as you get older and you learn from it. But I think those good moments like that truly was something that stuck with you so hard that it helped craft you as a man, like in terms of what you found to be enjoyable, not just in terms of like making a paycheck, but like really expressing yourself, right? Like to the point that you were like, no, I have to do this. I'm going to have poetry. I'm going to like learn how to build out this complete 360 campaign. It's mind blowing actually, because you don't think about how sometimes those type of memories completely can shift the trajectory of your life. Yeah. And especially when it's just like, what is dad doing this week? Like, I
mean, seriously, it was a lot like that. And I think, it took me a long time to realize, I mean, that was an old memory, like a very old memory. It took me a long time to realize that was kind of the genesis of where I started my career and why I changed from like astronomy and astrophysics to the kind of the arts. But I think that one thing I would say, especially as it relates to my parents, is my parents have always been, or they were always very interested in us defining ourselves, meaning like having our individual personhood being protected. So they would do things that I think, like, especially most people, when I tell them about it, they're like, it's weird. Like, we would do things like we'd have dinner, right? And if somebody didn't want to eat dinner, or they wanted like to go out and have like a hamburger, my parents would like go get a hamburger for that one person, and we would all eat dinner, except for that one person who would eat whatever the hell they wanted. And it sounds weird, right? But the thing that's interesting about it is it makes it like the thinking that they instilled in us was so, it helped us stay independent in our minds about and be very kind of clear about who we are and what it is that we wanted in life.
Right.
And even now, like I'm my brothers and I are in our 40s, and you can see it much more clearly now because like we all have our own distinct careers, and the way that we work is an echo of the way that we were taught.
Mm-hmm. I think we are, having like that similarity, and even something that you pull from, like I was definitely, and I have to just take a step back, understanding that my parents respectively were from like, that baby boomer generation. Mm-hmm. My father was even older. I didn't even realize this. His generation was called the lost generation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow. How rude. But basically, the reason why it was called that is because like my dad was born in 1935. So it was like, it wasn't like popping like the roaring 20s. You're in the middle of a depression. Like you're also right before World War II happened. So it's just like, it was too much going on in the world. Like, look, just be happy you're here, and we'll pick this back up once everything settles. Mm-hmm. But having both of them, or both of those perspectives, they were wildly like into like my autonomy, like you said, and just wildly into like me going for what it was that made me happy. Like even in school, my parents had a thing where they were like, look, truly, as long as it is your best effort and we know when it is not, we will accept it. So having that.
That's excellent. Yeah.
But that's the thing. It was also kind of a double-edged sword because I was smart. So they knew like I truly could get grounded for B's. Like, well, everyone else is just out here like, girl, why are you not outside kicking it? I'm like, I got a B. And they were like, what? And I'm like, I'm not going to get an A. Oh, they knew I was like talking too much.
Yeah.
But things like that, it does help push you in terms of your focus, and as well as terms of your passion. And even something that you said leading me to like my next question. So like now currently with you spending so many years in the industry, racking up this type of experience, going from one amazing company and brand to another, you have seen, I don't even know if I can call it the ascension of Blackness, or I'll just put it as like the progression of Blackness within like advertising, marketing, and media. Like you said, like, recently I've started working with us, but it was not, and we all, I think, kind of have those stories of like, girl, I just stopped being the token like 10 months ago.
Right, exactly. I totally agree. Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that? Like, is this something that you feel, when you see these shifts, like, how does it make you feel? Do you feel hopeful? Or are you just like, oh, here we go, everyone's on some performative shit? Like, what?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually, it's one of those things that I talk to a lot of people that are kind of in my cohort, at the career cohort, even though we don't necessarily do the same thing, like people that are, directors or C-levels and executives. And one of the things that I think all of us are doing, or that we feel quietly, but we don't talk about very much. I think I've only talked about it with like 2 people, but I now understand that like all of us are thinking the same thing, which is there's a certain short attention span of mainstream American culture, right? And I think that the things that we saw that sparked the Black Lives Matter movement, not really sparked the Black Lives Matter movement, brought it into the forefront of American conversation, and then therefore brought it into the forefront of global conversation. Those things kind of have a shelf life. Like George Floyd's death actually has a shelf life, and not because Black people wanted to have a shelf life, but because non-Black people don't have that much attention for it. And so I think for a lot of us, one of the things that we realized pretty early on was there's a moment here that we can actually pretty dramatically increase the balance, not just for Black people, but for people that are underrepresented in general in the spaces that we have leadership over and the spaces that we operate in. And I think that is what most of us have been sprinting for, which is how many people can we mentor? How many people can we get into positions that they could not get into 5 years ago, and they may not be able to get into 5 years from now? How do we amplify all of the progress that has been made and make sure we don't lose ground collectively? And I think we're also trying to balance that while not allowing that to turn into any sort of bias that will, color the way that we work and color the way that we think about things. And so the way that I look at it, is I think it's a really important piece and a really important movement. I think that personally, I had to just swallow a lot of insecurities and be vulnerable to people that, frankly, I didn't know very well in corporate environments, so that they could understand what it meant to be Black and watch, George Floyd get murdered and beg for his mother. And I think that I don't think I can, there's not a lot that I feel I have done in any meaningful way. But I think if I can move some of those people in the right direction emotionally and just from an empathetic standpoint, that will help a lot of people that will come after me, hopefully. And in the same breath, I'm going to do everything I can to do the exact same thing, which is I want to see more of us in these spaces. And the reason why is not, it's not selfish or that I just want to see Black faces in these spaces or people of color in these spaces or more women in these spaces. It's because that is a more accurate representation of what the actual fucking world is. And I think that as long as I've been in tech, it's terrifying how much power we have concentrated in such a very select group of people. And granted, that's been true for a lot of most of human history. But when you see it up close and you see and realize the world that we are all kind of using, especially in the digital spaces, for a long time was not built for us, and it wasn't built with us in mind. And I think that anything we can do to kind of balance that scale is exactly what we should be doing.
I completely agree. I think even in terms of like you said, that world wasn't built for us. I didn't grow up in a household, even with internet. If you are living below the poverty line, the internet is when you go to the library and then you wait in line with everyone else who is allotted an hour to try and get their homework done. And you just keep going in shifts with everyone that's there with you. So no, I didn't even grow up with that. Oh, I'm going to play the Oregon Trail. We're playing that in computer class. And then you're going home to public access television. Mm-hmm. I think that when you say this trajectory or looking at the attention span, the interest level, whatever, it is, I think I look at it in a perspective of when you think about, whether you think about warfare, whether you think about how you build out programs, not everyone can be a soldier.
That's right.
And I think once I finally understood that a little bit better, it's really helped me to navigate okay, what is revolution to me and how do I now bring that into the workplace? I have a lot of people in my life that I know through and through. They will never be able to work in corporate America because they just it's they don't have the bandwidth to politic, to kind of maneuver. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I do know this. They need me to bring up, hey, you need to holler at Joe Fresh Goods. Y'all need to talk to so-and-so. Because whereas they will never be that person that is I'm clocking in or I'm doing this in this perspective, I know that I serve as a gatekeeper to culture as well as subculture. Because I'm very big on, once I see it 2 times, I'm nope, we're not doing another footworking piece. We're moving on. And I think that's a big, I don't even want to say weight off my shoulders, but I think it really has helped. I think a lot of people, once you realize your place in the journey of it's not necessarily saying you're less than because you're not on the front line. But someone had to feed Martin and Baynard and Coretta and everybody after they just got their ass beat.
Exactly.
And sat in jail all weekend.
Exactly.
So I think it's, knowing your placement still helps progress.
Yeah.
It's especially now seeing how people can't go back to what I like to call, willful ignorance. Like it's just, it's not possible anymore.
That's right.
So I think that's something like, so looking in terms of like with you being in a creative space, how is it, that you find your inspiration? Because case in point, like everyone loves, there's Ad Age, there's, I personally am always scrolling through and explore. I love a good explore page to help me find things, but there's so many platforms and ways to do it. Personally, I am most inspired when I just go walking in the hood. I kid you not. Like when I just go walking and beating the concrete, that's where I get like my best thoughts and interactions. But what like really sparks your creativity or your imagination?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of the advertising industry and marketing industry. And when I say that, I don't mean that I don't like the pursuit of like mass communication. Okay. I just think that.
Like, well, what industry? I was like, you here with us?
Okay. Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, but it's one of those things. I don't think that I think it's very. The word I want to use is incestuous. And let me explain what I mean. I think that the industry tends to look at itself for inspiration, and that tends to produce the same type of work over and over again. And it tends to produce same stories about the same kind of people over and over and over again. And I don't necessarily think, by the way, this is just limited to like marketing and advertising. I think this is a statement generally about media. And I think that for me, I try to be very active in looking in places that I would not expect to look. So I'm a big fan of, I follow like a tremendous amount of people you've never heard of on Instagram, for example, or on TikTok. Like people like have basically no subscribers, but they keep putting out content and putting out like interesting things. And it's an interesting thought because what I found, it's not, I mean, a lot of it, there's a lot of trash out there, no doubt. But the thing that happens, especially with smaller creators, and people, when I say creators, I'm not just talking about people making videos, but people that are like artists and artisans, is that they tend to not be so influenced by the mob. And so they start making things that are more human and things that are actually trying to say something.
And that resonate with them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that what I've tried to do in my career is make things that actually say something more interesting than just try to sell something. And I think over the years, I've finally realized that like one of the things that is very cliche to say, but it is true, the closer you can get to a human truth, meaning a truth that if you say it to basically anybody, they will be like, oh, yeah, that's true. The better the work will be. And I think a lot of the work that we do in marketing and advertising is, trying to take a human truth and wrap a message around that is tied to a brand or tied to something. But I think it's also important to do things that are not that as an individual and as a creative. So you kind of need to do your own artistic things. You need to write. You need to draw just on the chalkboard or on the sidewalk. You need to just make things. And I think that it's easy to miss it. And especially the higher up you go, you think you're doing things that are important because you have an important job with an important title and they pay you a lot of money to do X, Y, Z. But that is probably the least important creative work that you will do if you, by comparison to the stuff that you are generating on your own, the things that you're collaborating with other people and you're trying to tell a story that doesn't have like a brand attached to it, because it makes you a better storyteller and it makes you more effective at humanity, which is at its core, especially for a creative, but I would say in general for a marketer, like those things that's why people are good or not. And most people in this industry are not. I can count on one hand, like the greatest marketers I've ever dealt with, the greatest. And most of those people are really just storytellers. They're the kind of people like, yeah, sure, you could write like a spot that's like got a bunch of writers and director and all kinds of stuff going on. But I'm most interested in the core human part of storytelling. So people that can just stand in front of a camera or stand in front of a group of people and just hold their attention is fascinating to me.
Like I say, like you call it like, you know, what is the human truth? And I've always, for me, it's always been described of what does it make you feel?
Yeah.
Like if you can get to that to me is the biggest impact. It supersedes any metric, any analytic, any study that you're doing. Like if you can get to that, it will capture people. And especially like, you know, our industry is good for an attention span metric. We love it. Well, are they right? And it's like, again, if we get to the heart of the matter, or if we really tell the story in a convincing and authentic way, they will stay.
Yeah,
I don't care what reports say. And I think that's something that like you hit that on the head. And also, it's a lot of responsibility, you know, that once you're getting closer to that C-suite or any CEO will tell you, they don't know half of what is going on in there.
No, they do not. That is a great way to describe that. Yeah, nobody. Actually, that's a good thing to just pause for a moment on, because I think that a lot of people don't understand this. I've dealt with so many executives and like very, very, very big and hypothetically smart people. That the only thing I can say consistently about most of those people is they are nowhere near as impressive as you think they are, or as impressive as their brands lead you to believe they are. And I don't know, I'm not making that statement to say that like they are.
I know you're not saying to knock them.
Well, no, yeah, and I'm not saying that they're undeserving of the successes they have. I just think that there's a mythology that's built up around, especially in tech, around founders and around like the captains of industry that make the world go around. And you get in a room with some of these people and you're like, okay, that is not what I was expecting. And my cousin Barbie is like way cooler than this and way smarter. I don't understand what's happening. But I think it's an important statement about, it's not a statement on those people in my mind. It's more of a statement about the power of the mythologies that we built up around these people.
It's the branding.
Yeah. And it separates, that mythology separates us, regular people, from those people and the successes they've had. And it makes it so that we start fighting ourselves to even consider that we could be in those spaces.
Exactly. And I think, I kid you not, getting back to the origin story of like why it's so important to have people around you that will push you to not get caught up in that.
Yeah.
My mom always used to say, like, I don't care if they're richer. All that means is that they might die in a better box than you.
It's true.
And when she said, I was like, my God, you're absolutely correct. The only way you can impress me truly, if you have figured out immortality, now we need to have a conversation. Exactly. But outside of that, I'm like, death comes for us all, whether it's, you know, a mythical story that's being told in Sherlock Holmes that I loved. Like when he was like, this man did all this to run away from death. And he was like, yeah, I knew you were going to be here at 6 p.m. anyway. So you ready to go or not? And it's just like, it makes so much sense just in that aspect of like, just do your best work. And you also unwittingly brought up like the second point about that what it made me think of. People are so close to always trying to get to the CEO that they really forget that the doorman is actually who you really at times need to be talking.
I mean, a lot of times, yeah, you get a lot more done for sure.
Because that's the thing. I have the people that are not necessarily respected or taken into consideration. Let me tell you something. I have learned very quickly in my career, don't make an EA mad. Nope. That is not the person that you want to get on their bad side, because they are truly the gatekeepers. I want to present this. I want to do that. I'm a cool kid, but you're disrespecting the people because you don't think they have the position or the title. So they're under you and therefore don't require your respect.
Yeah.
And that's something that even like, yeah, you treat the doorman with the same respect as the CEO, but I'm always like, and sometimes you treat the doorman better. Because they're the ones that know the
generally speaking,
schedule, when they go to lunch, when they're not in a good mood, like they will tell you everything if you do right by them. And I think that's something you brought up, titles and position. The higher up you get, also the more so people beneath you, or not beneath you in terms of who they are, but just level wise.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, we got to be cool. We got to be friends. I'm like, you don't give a damn about string theory. Stop trying to like say something random just because you want Remy to talk to you. Like, string theory for me is mozzarella. What is Sargento doing? I don't know what it is. Like, we're never going to bond on that. Unless I watch the Big Bang Theory episode, and then I'm like, okay, cool, Sheldon. Well, that's about it. But so in terms of that, like the saying is, heavy is the head that wears, the crown, and you have a lot of responsibility. I feel like you've had it for some time, because this isn't like your first time having a role or a position of this magnitude. How do you balance that in the sense of, teaching yourself like how to separate the two, not to let it overtake you? And what advice would you give for people that are just like, look, I don't know how he does it or how to do it?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is that's important to ground yourself. And this is, I think, more important the more successful or at least elevated you are in your career. I think I try to remind myself a lot that the difference between where I am currently sitting in terms of my life and where I could have been with changes to my life earlier that I had no control over it's a whisper of a difference, and it would be dramatic. Like I could be in a very different position. And I think that for me, the thing I'm trying to zero in on is this thought that I am very much trying to be a good human being, and not trying to be like a good corporate person necessarily, and trying to be better tomorrow than I am today, and try to do better for other people than I did yesterday. And I think that has not always been successful for me, but I think that I try to burn that into my soul so that I keep that in mind. And even when we talk about things like the seniority of someone or not inside of a corporate organization, the reality to me is there's so much luck involved in how we get to the places we go. And some of that is not luck, like in the case of systemic racism, right? But some of this is where we're allowed to go has been controlled for a long time. Right. But I think that it's all I can do is I don't know how I am going to be remembered as a human being long after I'm dead. But what I can do is try to influence the people around me, and the things that give me that scope gives me balance in the work that I do. Because I think that it's really easy to get totally bent out of whack if you have some very powerful CEO or VP or whoever talking to you, and people are losing their minds, and there's a firestorm going on. People are just they take things too seriously. And the reality is we're not doing things that are that serious or important. And my job as a creative director and as an executive is to understand the difference between all the things that are going on and the things that are important that are going on. And it's easy to get lost in that swirl. So a lot of times, one of the things people will note about me is I am supernaturally calm in a firefight. And part of the reason why I am is not because I'm disconnected emotionally, but it's because I usually have established what it is that is most important, and everything else is not important, meaning I don't have to think about it. And usually if you do that, you will end up in much more successful places, and you will end up ideally with quite a few less gray hairs than you probably would have otherwise.
Definitely. And then I think that's really sound advice to take, just in the sense of once you strip away what's truly important, and you're not walking into it based on a position or the opportunity, you're walking into it based on showing up as your real self, and doing right by people and doing right by your own vision, and I think that, I completely agree. That is what makes, the difference. I think you mentioned how your life could have went two completely different trajectories. And we all, we have that where it's just man, I could have stayed in this situation and been here. Versus I made this choice. I chose the red pill or the blue, whatever pill you chose, and now I'm here at this place in my life. Is there a moment in which when we're looking at the flow and ebbs that is life, and you were just I don't know necessarily how to navigate this, and like what was that teachable moment or that learning lesson that helped you like get back to your true self, or get back to like, okay, I found my mojo again?
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it's interesting because one of my superpowers is I am how would I describe it? Is that I'm really interested in people. So like I understand how people think, and I have a pretty good understanding of how they feel about things. And I'm also a watcher of people. So like I'll also pay very close attention to people themselves as individuals. But I think the thing that has made me successful more than anything else I've ever done, and I would argue that it is probably the most universal thing that will make you successful, is I'm completely fearless intentionally about the stuff that I do. So a lot of times when I say fearless, I don't necessarily mean that I don't have fear, because I think in reality, I'm terrified of a lot of the moves that I've made. But I do think that I have made more clear-headed decisions when I have allowed the fear to like drain away from me and understand, like, not like, I'll give you an example. There used to be, like, when I started into leadership roles, one of the fears that I had was that like people would not take me seriously because I was a Black dude. And more in particular, I was like, I'm like a big Black dude. And I think that I thought I would have to like fight my way into it. And I for a long time, when I say long time, I think for the first few times I was offered a leadership role anywhere, I turned it down because I was afraid that I would not be able to keep up, not intellectually, but keep up emotionally with the needs of both managing what I perceive as how people perceive me, and managing what's actually going on in the work environment. And so I think just peeling away the fear and really just making decisions based on what's actually in front of you has always made the difference. Like I people that know me, especially at the executive level, I'm a very nice dude, but I will absolutely tell you the complete and honest, total fucking truth that nobody wants to tell you. And a lot of times the way that I determine what quality of person I'm dealing with is how they react to that truth. Now, some people have like flipped out and fired me. Some people have been very thoughtful about it and made changes based on it. And some people are just so stunned that they don't say anything for a while, or they just don't do anything at all. And I think that understanding that, like that, getting over that fear of doing that, because like I said, I've done it to some surprisingly senior people that have their own mythologies like floating around them. But it's worked, and it's weird because it's like in Black culture, like it's normal to tell people what you think about things. It is not normal to do that in a corporate environment.
Oh,
and so
no.
You're kind of like pulling like the parts of Black culture in that you need for certain things. But yeah, that fearlessness has been very helpful, but it has to be tempered, or at least in my case, it had to be tempered with the language of corporate environments, and like the almost insincerity behind all of it. You still have to like pierce all that with a truth that is still true within that context.
Yeah. I literally sat back one day and realized that a lot of the L's I thought I was taking in corporate America was because I didn't understand that when white people ask you a question, they are not necessarily asking, they're telling you something.
That's true. It's entirely possible. Yeah.
And that's the thing, because the environment I think not only just on a macro level is our community, like you said, like Black people, we will tell you how it is. Like there is
whether you like it or not, for sure.
Like, so wait, I can't find this. And so you didn't send this to me, and I need you to do it now because we have to do X, Y, and Z. Or it's like, oh, I didn't see that. Are you sure it's there? And it's like,
yeah.
Well, I sent it over. Yeah. Like, why are we doing this? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry if you didn't see. It's like this song and dance that like happens. And I really sat back and had to think and be like, oh my God. If I'd have realized this so much sooner, I probably would have let go from a lot of the places I was at. But at the same time, like, it's the fearlessness that you mentioned. And also, you didn't say it, but it's a culture fit too.
Totally.
Because you have to, or that's how I interpreted what you said, I should say. It's just a matter of like, if it's perceived, or like sometimes you got fired, they were completely like they're not a good culture. Remy is problematic as fuck. Or sometimes it's like they didn't know how to respond to it at all, so they're just like, let's just act like it never happened.
Yeah.
Or those
for the longest time, honestly, that feature of my kind of personality, I thought was going to be just a tremendous long-term liability, because I was like, yes, I'm being honest with people. I don't think I'm doing it the wrong way. But, like I said, I've been let go because of stuff like that, like the day of, you know what I mean? And what I've realized over time now, because now I have much broader networks of people that I've worked with, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. Now I see, looking backward, the wake of my career, and I see that what has happened is that people see me as an honest person, and not just an honest person, but a smart, honest person that is actually trying to achieve something, like is very focused on like getting whatever like is in front of me done. And that has made it so that part of my reputation in the industry, and part of the reputation I carry professionally, is like, if you ask me a question, I will probably give you the most nicest, honest answer you will get. Right. And you can trust that I'm an honest source in that sense. And it might be like, oh yeah, your breath stinks. You know what I mean? But it also, but it will be true.
Also, here's some Winterfresh gum, because I love you and I want you to win.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
You're like, so no, this treatment is not good, but this is what we're going to do to make it better. And I think that you don't, it makes no sense to put sugar on shit. Like it's like you're going to just continue, and it doesn't help the person grow.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Like the second I realized, first, I have a thing like, you lie to people you think are stupid, or that you don't. I'm like, or on your life, I'm like, and I know I'm very intelligent, so it's like that's something where it's like, help me, and if it's not the best, to tell me that. Which is, this is rolling right along like so naturally and organically.
Yeah,
like this
great.
brings me to Black excellence.
Yeah.
I have had this conversation more ways than I would like to. I literally, kid you not, just got through watching Harlem on Amazon Prime, which...
Love it, by the way. Love that show.
I'm never watching season 1 again because I had to accept it. Like, I literally went through it was too triggering.
I get you. Yeah.
I was in the house, like, just eating snickerdoodle ice cream and crying all weekend. It was bad. Like, my friends were like, we should have never let you watch it.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But, phenomenal show. But not giving it away from anyone who hasn't seen it, but there's a moment where one of the characters, Angie, who is, everybody need an Angie. She's fucking nuts. But you gotta have her. Yeah. She's having this whole debate about, Black art, Black excellence, and the fact of like, our art should be able to be criticized just like anyone else's. And I have definitely said, I was like, I've said that shit. Like,
yeah.
Because there have been moments where I'm just like, no, the movie was not good. The sweeping wide shots were amazing. I watched it on mute. Like, and I'm not even going to go into it. Like things where I'm like, we know this person's going to give amazing cinematography. I do not necessarily care for their storytelling. And no, I'm not dying on this cross of supporting them just because they're Black.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because like then the other balance is, but there are very few opportunities. It's always this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, so the way that I look at it is I think Black excellence has a place in Black culture and in popular culture. And the reason why it has a place is because Black culture and Black art has been artificially suppressed and intentionally kind of like appropriated and stolen to enrich other people, usually white people. And the thing is, I think that the Black excellence thought is coming from a place of elevating into visibility what that means. But what I think is accidentally also done, not accidentally, but it's an outcome of the fact that we are also like still growing and progressing as a people and as a culture, is that people are rightly asking a question, which is like, Black excellence is not the only way to be Black. And it's not, and it puts an undue level of pressure on people that is not the same pressure, for example, that people that are like non-people of color, like white people have. They don't have these kind of things. They're not sitting around. Nobody that, or very few people that I'm aware of that operate in like very predominantly white spaces or predominant spaces that people of color are not in. They don't question whether or not their performance is going to impact the way that everyone sees all of the people that look like them.
They just put it out there.
Yeah, and so I think that's the part where I'm hypercritical about everything. If like you really get to know me, that's like I'm a curator. Like I will always have a fucking opinion about something, but that doesn't always mean that my opinion needs to be heard. And that's doubly so true now that my role has elevated to a place where like my opinions actually carry more weight than I want to in a lot of places. And so
I saw that on LinkedIn because you at this point now you can be like, I really, really love Periwinkle, and then it'll be like 58.
You got it, yeah.
Too, Remy.
So you just have to be like super careful about things, right? Like and I would even go so far as to say I remember the first time it happened that I realized how much my words were carrying weight in certain rooms. That I was almost one of those people. I quit a lot of jobs. I haven't been fired very often. I've been fired a couple of times for key disagreements with like CEOs and stuff.
Right. But like, well, thank you for your services.
Kind of that kind of stuff, right? Right. But I remember I used to joke all the time about like somebody quitting or somebody getting fired, like as a lower ranked employee. And I remember I made some joke about some dude getting fired in a meeting that I was leading. And he reported to me, but it was like a super casual thing. You know, I was just acting like Remy in the street would act. Ooh, as soon as that landed, it was funny to me. And then I looked around and I'm like, oh no. These people think I'm serious, that this guy needs to be fired. And I think, you know, I started to really understand that those words that I say have impact. And it's kind of why I'm less inclined to pick apart art from people of color or criticize it in an open way. I'm more than willing, to have a discussion about it, like over a glass of wine or something, right, in an individual setting. But I know that there's a lot of things that can be used as weapons against our own people if we're not careful about what comes out of our mouth. And I think that Issa said it best, which is that I'm rooting like for everybody Black. Like I don't give a shit what you're doing. If I can help and support it, and again in a way that is fair, I will do it 100% of the time. And if I can provide any kind of guidance or support, like I'm always down to do that. But I think Black excellence is one of those things that, in a way, I kind of hope it goes away. Not because I don't like it, but because I think it implies that we have to define
or we're tiered
Black excellence in order to recognize Black people.
Yeah. And you said so for me, it's always been more so of a thing of just like, if your Black excellence is cover for your classism,
exactly,
then fuck you. So that's how I've always said, because my thing is, I and so many other people that I know don't necessarily have the esteem of being a part of the Black aristocracy and what I mean. And no, and it's not anything bad, but I am not the great grandchild of Frederick Douglass.
That's right.
I am,
There's a lot of them out there though. I've met quite a few.
Exactly. God, I'm like, this family was huge. I'm like, sweet Jesus, he was on that hill living life. But that's what I'm saying. Like, and it's not even to disrespect. I love when I see people that are like, yes, I have that type of heritage or lineage, but I also love the fact that my family is able to trace, or at least on my father's side, is able to trace back our roots to the plantation we were from, which for a lot of African Americans is still unheard of.
That's right.
Because the last state wasn't required. Louisiana was the last state that wasn't required to care about Black people's birth certificates. And that was 1924.
My father didn't have a birth certificate.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
from Louisiana. He was born in New Orleans.
See? And so when you're having even those type of conversations of like, the pride and the heritage and, we were on the Mayflower, we came, there's our ledger and our name in Ellis Island. a lot of that is not given to certain aspects of the African diaspora, right? And so that's my thing is like, I am just as proud of, my grandma and my mama who picked walnuts in the 60s on a ship. I translate this loosely because that was the new slavery on a sharecropper's, farm, just as much as I am of like my cousin who a different branch, I don't associate with him, but who's Apollo, from the Rocky movies. It's just like, oh, okay, cool. Carl Weathers. So it's like, either way, I still think it's Black excellence.
Yeah.
And I think that's something where it's like, we don't discuss that enough of like, if you're surviving in this type of society under this type of pressure, knowing that people look at you as second-class citizens, even though you have built this country, I think that is something to celebrate in itself. But at the same time, like, I have slightly shifted I'm rooting for everyone Black after I've vetted you. I'm rooting because I've seen also like in wanting to support our own, we still need to do the research because I've seen a lot of our own who's like, no, we are in it for ourselves. And so that's once I make that line of demarcation, then I'm like, kinfolk. Have all my money and all my support. Everyone else, go with God. Like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I think the way that I keep looking at it is when there's 50 or 100 times as many people of color and people from underrepresented groups in these spaces that have historically excluded us.
Right.
Then I will start getting particular about like who's in what and whether or not they deserve to be there. But I doubt that'll happen in my lifetime, and God willing, it does. But I'm saying like, there's so few of us comparatively that I'm just trying to get good people in the door and let them. Ideally, what I would love is for them to actually not have to carry the weight of like, I have to represent my whole group of people in everything that I do. I want them to have the same freedom that people who aren't in underrepresented groups have, which is they don't even think about it.
Exactly. And that I can completely agree. And that's the thing, like, it's not a thing of like, oh, I'm changing. We have to change our opinions. Like, but that I can totally agree on. Just as long as I'm there, yes, doing my utmost, but I'm never going to be in a space where I'm publicly bashing,
Yeah, I get it.
Like, I'm never pulling an Angie. I'm like, girl, how you gonna do that in front of this man's white producer? Like, you don't have the coins to facilitate this. I know recently, like, we just lost like Virgil Abloh, and that is something I even had made a post about it. I was just like, look, your creators ain't got it this week and y'all need to chill, because I'm like, everyone's feeling it.
Yeah.
What do you think when it comes to like, when we lose people like that, whether it is a James Baldwin, a Virgil Abloh, a Tupac, just people that are really like these cultural phenomena in a sense. And not saying that everything was 100% golden or everything was 100% bad. Like, that's not life. But what do you think that means for the culture, like in terms of how we move forward? Because it's such a huge hit,
It's a weird thing. First of all, obviously, like when we lose people that have not completed the course of their lives, like in what we had hoped that their lives would be. I mean, there's no way to kind of fill the hole. And I'm always grateful that our culture still honors that thought that, there is a real mourning, and not just a mourning within the individual, but as a community. I think with Virgil and even like with Chadwick, like these guys had just incredible artistic futures ahead of them. And I think losing them is a big blow, but I also think that the amount of stuff that they got done in the time that they had is phenomenal. And if anything, my hope is that their successes and the directions that they were running in inspire like 1,000 people behind them to do the same things, because I think that's what their actual most important impact will be, which is inspiring people that came up behind them, but also the humanity that they brought into the world that they were inhabiting. And I think that, Virgil was one of those people that he he like bled creativity all over the place, and you didn't have to like it. Like, it didn't matter whether or not you liked it or not, or or whether or not you had an opinion. Like, he was also, fairly open to hearing most people's opinion about the work that he was doing, but it didn't color the work that he did, which is a hard thing to do, especially in the public space. And he didn't allow even like the scope of one industry, like the fashion industry, to define the work that he did. So I think
when I looked up and I'm like, he got a deal with IKEA. Like, what is happening?
Exactly,
He didn't and that's like what interior design. Like, okay, yeah.
It's interesting because I think I don't by any stretch of the imagination think like hustle culture or even the thought of hustling is a Black thing. I think it's a poor people thing, which is where I come from, and I think there's some of that mentality of entrepreneurship and that mentality of just looking for ways to do something different. I think that is something that he carried with him. And I think that's something that he like sprinkled all over the places that he set foot on. So I am beyond bummed that he's gone. And I think that it's hard to quantify why it's important that he was here or why it's important that we don't have him anymore. But I think that his pathways will open up doors for other folks that will do amazing things. And I just hope that I can do something to like pave a couple of stones on the way there for them, because I think that I can't wait for the day that somebody Black doesn't have to remember that they're Black in the spaces that we're operating in.
Yeah. I think that is the ultimate goal, where it's just like, I can just be as myself. I don't have to worry about it, whether it's my mate. I don't have to worry about it, whether I come into a corporate structure. And I think that's what makes life at times so challenging, because it's like, for all those things that are mentioned and not mentioned, it's like, that's in theory, because it's no one's reality.
That's right.
I don't care how evolved, we think we are as humans. Like, there's always still a conversation about interracial marriage. There's always still a conversation about being Black in corporate spaces. There's always something. How are you Black in politics? Are you an abolitionist? Are you a reformist? It's just like, look.
Right. Yeah.
At this point, I just want to be like literally singing a Negro spiritual in the middle of Louisiana. Like, it's just like, it's tiring. It is so tiring.
That's right.
And so thinking about that and wrapping up, this has been a phenomenal conversation. But, as we wrap up, like, what is it, going into this next phase, whether it's your career, yourself personally as a husband, whatever, like, what is it that you're looking forward to in terms of like bringing you Black joy? Like, just just bringing you joy, period.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. What is like, what are you looking forward to with that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an issue. It's like, okay, so I grew up in a house that was pretty poor at different points, and like, my mother and my brothers and I like lived out of a car for a while. Like, we've been through some like stuff together, and it's the thing that's interesting is I've gotten to a place in my life where I'm comfortable, like super comfortable, both in terms of the finances and like the surroundings that I've built around myself. But I realized over time that I am an expert at being poor, but I am not. It's still something to get around my head of not being poor. And I don't even mean being wealthy. I mean just not being poor. Like, I can tell you how to survive for 2 weeks, like on $15 by getting like rice and potatoes and a lot of like spices.
If you ain't ever had a kettle to make spaghetti and had that spaghetti last you for 8 days,
that's right.
And this up, I don't want to hear it.
And granted, that's not, like, to be clear, again, that's not like a Black thing or even a person of color thing, but the people who are most affected by that are generally proportionally people of color or Black people. And I think that I learned very early on how to survive in that way, because that was one of the things that my parents were very adamant about teaching us. And they taught me how to operate in the spaces that I operate in now. Like, it's not an accident that I'm good at navigating these spaces. Mm-hmm. But I realized that I don't necessarily know how to be Remy in the space that I'm operating anymore. Like it's not entirely clear to me, and I don't mean that I'm totally confused about who I am as a person. It's just I think what I'm trying to do now is try to understand like what is the next era of my existence look like, and what is it that I should be focused on. I think as a general rule, I have kind of put out this thought that I want to support a lot of the people that came up like I did, and the people that are in very difficult situations that are systemic. They were introduced outside of our control. But I also think that that's not enough, because I think the dude that I want to be is like a scientist, is an astrophysicist, and is an artist, and is also like a storyteller and a person that will come over and help you move your shit if that's what you need. And I think that what I'm trying to focus on now when I look forward is trying to remove all the roadblocks that, well, it's weird. I'm trying to remove the things that help me get to where I am, but have now become roadblocks, because, you know, like there's a lot of mentalities there that like you just have to unwind and peel apart. And I'm trying to like slowly do that piece by piece.
Because I think it's based on the trust factor of like, you keep it so close because it's like anything can happen. You're not used to having that solid foundation. So you're like, look, let me just keep it close in case anything happened. Like I instantly know, I don't care where I am, what I need to do to get on somebody's unemployment. I got to cancel that bill. I got to get rid of my facials, no more skin suit. Like we know what the list is to go back living small.
Yes.
Because it's happened more times than we would like to count before. It's like living in want mentality is like what I how I've always kind of defined it. And for an example, something so simple. I really wish when people were, you know, going over this whole new home ownership thing, I really want to start to see more conversations around the amount of emotional trauma that it will bring up in people.
For sure. When
you're a first-time home buyer, everyone looks at it from this business analytical perspective. I have seen no one, I do nowhere, where they talk about it from the fact of like emotionally what it will do to you. And the thing that triggered me, I didn't even realize I was doing this until my loan officer was like, you were doing it because you were broke, you were poor. And I was like, oh my God. What it was, I had an exorbitant amount of overdraft fees. And she was just like, this is a problem. She was like, your debt to income ratio is amazing. There's no reason why you can't get this building. She was like, the problem is when I take this to the underwriter, they're gonna be like, what the fuck is she doing with her money? Like, if she got this good ass job, why can't she, like, she's not doing good money management. And what it was, did not even connect it when I was a teenager, when I was like struggling. When you get close enough to paycheck day, like 2 days, you will factor in your overdraft fees. So you're just like, fuck it. I'm gonna just get like, okay, that'll be like $68. I'll get 2 of those. But then it's like, I can get food that I really wanted or needed, or I can do this. And then when I got my nice job, it was just like, whatever, like nothing, fine. Okay, you took a 150, or I did this, or I messed up and forgot to carry the zero. And I know though I have the paycheck that's completely going to supplement that, until you're trying to do real shit. And then they're like, this can potentially get you denied for a loan for a house. So you're like, are you kidding me?
That's right.
But it's living in that want mentality, or rather in that want mentality of like, shoot, I need to be living in excess. Put in the work. Yes, things can happen that one day you are not the golden boy or the golden girl, and they're just like, look, we don't have it, you got to go. But until that, it's like living in a space of like, you deserve it, you worked your ass off for it. Lord knows we have, you sacrificed, and it's going to be celebrated.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, honestly, the thing I do, because I've made a lot of like big jumps very quickly in my career, especially the last say half of my career. And one of the things that those jumps do is it kind of puts you in like a whole nother tax bracket, which is a whole nother surprising thing to even understand, which I haven't processed yet. But what I will intentionally do is when that happens, and it's happened probably like 3 or 4 times, I will like stop all the things that I'm doing before like I start a new job or like move into a new space and just understand. I kind of sit with myself. I sit with like the people who are closest to me and understand like I and we have to grow. Like we can't take the thing that brought us to this point and go forward with it. We have to grow into this thing that we're becoming. And it's hard as shit to try to do that intentionally. Like normally when you grow, it's kind of an organic thing. This is so much more direct, and it's more like you have to, it's something you're talking about, which is that you have to like unwind the trauma and the suffering that you've gone through and understand that that's not normal. And that's not something you should like do normally and think that is okay. And you had to do it because you had to do it, but it doesn't have to be that way in the future. And the world that you will build in the future is so much more peaceful and beautiful. Like I look around my life right now and it's just so peaceful. But then I also realize the downside of that, especially if you move quickly and do it a lot, is you lose people along the way because you elevate beyond them. And you can try, like, obviously you can try to retain the relationships to a certain extent, but at a certain point, you're not even talking the same language anymore. Like you don't understand each other at all.
Exactly. I think I have been surrounded my whole life by a bunch of beautiful, talented dream deferreds. And you get to a place where it's just like, you love them, but you have to be like, I can't sit here in this because it's like, if I'm also putting in the work to get better, it's painful watching you and still be unhealed. Like I can't,
That's right.
I can't keep doing it because it's like, I can't keep telling you why this is my boundary and why you can't overstep this and why I love you, but you don't get to talk to me that way. Like you just get to a place of like, okay, I have to love you from a distance.
Yeah.
Truly doesn't mean I don't care for you, but it's like, I can't keep putting my dreams on hold because I'm waiting for you to finally get confidence in yours.
Exactly.
And I think like once I got to that space, and I've had to do that with like some people that I really am like, I'm always telling like, you're so talented, you can do this. Like, just believe in yourself. And it's like, why am I late? I didn't spend 2 hours on a phone call. They still ain't gonna listen. They still gonna give me hell, and then like wait for someone else to tell them you're grossly under serving yourself by charging this low rate. And I'm like, oh, okay, but when I said it, and I think, you get to a place of like you just don't want to put yourself through that.
Yeah. And
especially when you think about like it's time to start feeding your own destiny.
Sure.
Stepping into that. I have had this has been like the best combo. I'm so ready to go into like now because I'm like, yay!
I missed you. I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and talk. It's been good.
There's no one I can send like random funny memes to. No, that's a lie. I still got a couple people I be sending stuff to. Like, did you see this? Like, somebody get Fly's IG and tell him to shut up. No, I'm kidding. But, from the bottom of my heart, wishing you. I know the Remy of yesteryear is super, super proud to see the man you become. I cannot wait to see what you do, rock out in this new position.
Thank you.
I'm just so happy. If there's any way I can get like a couple of coupons because my prime is out of control. No,
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we don't do that.
Like, nah. So you talk to my people and they'll let you know.
No, thank you so much for inviting me, Joi. Again, like it's always good to talk to you, and I'm always amazed to see your growth and your successes, and you know me, I'm always like rooting, even if you don't hear me in the background. Yeah.
I definitely do, my brother. And so if there's anything you need, hands down, like I got you. And yes, everyone, I will see you next week for another episode of Joi Has Questions. Bye.
It's always joy. It's always good. It's always chosen. It's always chosen. And always black. Always black. Always black. Always black.